Thank you for tuning in to the Raising Global Leaders series. I have Chris Molina here. I'm so excited. He is the author of I'm in a leadership role, now what? He's also a dynamic speaker, and he is a brand new father. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, I am. Thank you for that. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm definitely brand new. It's been about a little bit over 3 months right now. So still learning everything as much as she's learning everything.
That's awesome. Congratulations. You're in for a wild, wonderful ride.
I bet.
So, Chris, I love your book. I'm in a leadership role, now what? So can you tell us how you got into leadership? What was your path into getting into leadership?
Sure, absolutely. And so my path into this and kind of what inspired me to do what I'm doing today and why I wrote the book kind of started as a side hustle. It started about 4 or 5 years ago. And at that time, I was in supply chain and operations, which was my profession in the Marine Corp, and it was my profession after I graduated from Purdue. But I had tons of free time every day because I was about 5 hours away from my wife, who was finishing up at Purdue University. And so I started doing something with that time. And I started focusing on something that I found when I was at Purdue before I graduated. While I was there, I found a passion. And I found a passion that I didn't feel that same type of passion at any point in my life except for when I was active duty in the Marine Corps and I was leading Marines. That's the only time that I felt this type of passion. And that passion was trying to help college students become better professionals and better leaders. And so I started there, and it kind of grew and blossomed into what I'm doing today. And I absolutely love what I'm doing today. And I also love the quote or the saying that the things that you do in your off time often lead to your next career move. And it was absolutely true for me because that's what I'm doing now. And I absolutely love it. So when I continued down this path about 4 years ago, started talking to more and more college students, I started to see a problem. And specifically two problems are the reason why I wrote this book and what I'm trying to solve. So there are two main problems. One of them starts at college. And if you're in college or if you're if you have very clear memories of what college felt like, then you probably remember being told that you need to differentiate yourself.
Yeah.
And that is being told to college students because there's so many people going to college nowadays than there was before. And it used to be decades ago that just going to college would separate you from everybody else. But that's not the case anymore because everybody has an associate's, most everybody has a bachelor's degree. But I digress. So these college students are being told that they need to differentiate themselves. And so the students will respond, well, how do I do that? And then the response that they get sounds a lot like this. It sounds like you need to get a leadership opportunity. You need to get a leadership role, put that on your resume. That will land you an interview for the company that you want for an internship or a full-time. The first problem is that nobody's telling these students what to do once they get that first leadership role on campus. And so as soon as they get that leadership role, they do exactly, or they say in their minds exactly what the title of my book is. I'm in a leadership role. Now what do I do? And if they haven't had any proper leadership training, then they're going to start creating bad habits, and then they're going to have a bad taste in their mouth for leadership in general. So that's the first problem that I'm trying to solve. And then the second problem that I'm trying to solve comes after college. So these students graduate, and then they go into whatever industry that they end up in. They will typically start as an individual contributor. Mm-hmm. And so they'll use whatever they learned in school to try to benefit their company, and they won't be managing people. And then 1 to 4 promotions will happen, and then they'll find themselves in their first supervisor role where they're actually managing people. And this will happen in their mid-30s or their low 30s, and for the really ambitious students, it might happen in their late 20s. When they get that first leadership role, that's when they start buying leadership books, and they start going to leadership conferences, and they start trying to finally develop their leadership skills.
Yeah.
think about that for a second, just everybody listening, because that doesn't make any sense at all. If you wait until you get a position to try to become better at that skill set, that is the worst way to go about being good at your job. And that's why that is exactly why whenever I'm talking to college students, to young professionals, to people that are seasoned professionals, everybody in the crowd, everybody raises their hand whenever I ask, raise your hand if you've ever had a crappy boss. Everybody raises their hand because nobody's helping these young people or these first-time supervisors understand what it means to be a leader. And they come at it a little bit too late. So that's kind of a long-winded answer of why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I was inspired to write the book and to continue my path. And I really hope that with what you're doing and what I'm doing and what people like us are doing, that there won't be a crowd full of people raising their hands whenever I ask that question.
Right. That's really good. And I hope that for the future as well. So one of the things that you do is you really focus your audience, especially for this book, on college students. And that's awesome because the parents that are listening, they're tuning in, have a wide age range of kids. And so I really like that you start not with the leadership and not even with the individual contributor, but before you even become an individual contributor, learning how to lead. Why do you think it's important to implement leadership strategies and learning about leadership techniques before you're even at a place where you're an individual contributor?
Absolutely. So I think, one, it was natural for me because the Marine Corps will throw you into leadership training from day one. So I was 18 years old and I was in MCRD San Diego, California. And I was on the yellow footprints, the infamous yellow footprints that all Marines know. And since day one, I was being taught leadership traits and principles because it's a bit more, it's I wouldn't say it's a bit more serious, but you're thrown into situations in the Marine Corps that something bad might happen and the leader might die or not be there or have to be hospitalized. And the next person up needs to know what to do. There's no time to read a book or go to a leadership course or talk to HR when that happens. You need to know what to do in that instance. So I think I naturally go from day one. Like, we need to understand how to do that from day one. But also, I think it's important as a society to have those strong leadership traits. There's in chapter 3 of my book, it's called Leadership 101. And one of the leadership principles that's in there says, or it's titled, that in order to be a good leader, you also need to be a good follower. And if we had a world where everybody knew leadership traits, foundational leadership traits that all good leaders know, that would be such a better world. Just think about if everybody couldn't read. If you sent me a text message or when we were on LinkedIn and you reached out to me and you sent the message and you had to worry about if I knew how to read that message, that would make things extremely difficult. And so it's important for us as a society to start building these leadership traits into our young adults and young children. But also, I guess that's my roundabout way of saying that it needs to be knee-jerk reactions for these foundational leadership traits. So the same way that if you need to add or subtract or anything else that the basic American human adult needs to understand, that's the exact same way that we need to go about leadership. So I'm not talking about these overarching leadership style things that a lot of the thought leaders in leadership write about. So the Tony Robbins, the Simon Sinek's, the Gary V's, all these people talk about these big strategies, and they're talking about it from the 40,000 foot level of a CEO, of what you need to do to inspire big organizations and inspire change and all these things. That's really good for those people that are running businesses. That does not help a college student or a high school student that needs to understand how to run a meeting. It doesn't help those young people understand how to set simple goals with people around them. It doesn't help them understand how to act in a room of their peers whenever bad news happens. When bad news happens, you don't need to panic because that's going to incite more panic. If something bad happens, you don't need to point the finger and blame people. And I could go on, but it needs to be something that is foundational so that we can all work much easier, because there's tons of noise going on in our organizations that doesn't need to be there. And it's only there because we don't have good leadership training at a young age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to take a minute and thank you for your service. I appreciate your sacrifice. And I'm just extremely grateful for that. What are some of the best leadership skills and techniques that you learned as a result of being a Marine?
Sure, that's an incredible question. And I would also say thank you for your support. My wife is also a Marine Corps veteran like I am, and so we have a little military family going on. So I always appreciate when somebody sincerely asks or sincerely expresses their gratitude. But there are so many leadership traits and principles that I have found useful that were ingrained in me in the Marine Corps. But I would say the one that is the most important for me is integrity. Because leadership always comes back to integrity for me. And that's something that I wish there was more of in the world, that you didn't have to, I wish you didn't have to guess if somebody was going to keep their word or do what they were going to do, say they were going to do. And to me, integrity means demonstrating the highest standards of consistent adherence to legal, ethical, and right performance and behavior. So really what that means in layman's terms, because it's nice to understand all those words put together in one sentence, but it really just means doing the right thing. And doing the right thing even when nobody's looking. And so that is one thing that I try to push forward in all of my leadership traits. So in chapter 3, when I'm talking about leadership 101, I like to think that I did a good job of peppering integrity in all of those leadership traits. And I didn't make it a specific one of you need to always do the right thing, because I think that's kind of beating a dead horse for some people, that you're always told do the right thing. That's why the law enforcement is there, making sure that everybody's doing the right thing. And if we can communicate that type of message throughout a larger message, then I think it's better for everybody. But for me, it's integrity, doing the right thing. If you're constantly always doing the right thing, then you're going to be a good leader. Yeah,
absolutely. I agree. Integrity should be something that you don't have to worry about, oh, I have to turn it on now. So I agree. So can you talk to us a little bit about your transition to leadership? You talk about in your book, and I've heard you speak before about dealing with a crisis and how you learned as a leader how to handle crisis and how that affects the team. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So in the book, I say that college organizations and college groups of students in colleges, they're replete with people who will panic at the first sign of anything bad happening. So if something doesn't go their way, then panic is the first thing that happens. And that's true, but that's also true anywhere. So it doesn't matter if you're in an industry that you've been in for a long time, something doesn't go the way that you want it. Most of the time, people are going to start panicking. And so you as a leader, and I want to make this distinction. Whenever I say leader, I don't mean somebody that's in a leadership position, because there are many people in leadership positions that are not leaders. So whenever I say leader, I really just mean somebody that has influence, because that's what leadership is. And that's what all the leadership experts will agree on, is that leadership equals influence. So if you can influence people around you, then you're a leader. And so you as a leader, regardless of what level you're at, if you panic and you influence those around you, then other people are going to panic. And so it's very important for you to not panic. And one specific story that I'll mention came when I was the president of Alpha Kappa Psi at Purdue University. And for people that don't know Alpha Kappa Psi, that's a co-ed professional business fraternity that is open to all majors. And my VP of management, or VP of membership, he was in charge of the entire recruitment process, as far as recruiting new members and then processing them through to become brothers. And so there were a couple of recruitment events that the college would put on as a whole, and then each student group would make sure that they had a table if they wanted it. And so I was walking up there to the event, to the venue, to participate, and he walks up to me. Pradeep was his name, Pradeep Gopal, and he walks up to me and says, "So I have some bad news." And I say, and I nod and I say, "Oh, so what's up?" Yeah. And he says, he continues to tell me that we don't have a table. Something happened with the paperwork, with submitting the request, that it didn't go through and it didn't process. So whenever he walked up, we did not have a table. And I nodded and I said, "Okay." And he just stared at me and I said, "So do we need to go home, or is there anything else that we can do?" And so he smiled at me and he said, "Well, I just talked to somebody and they said that if we process our paperwork right now, then we can have a table at the end. It wasn't in the middle where we wanted it to be, but it would still be there." And he kind of smiled and I said, "Okay, well, let's do that then." And we did that. And then at the end of that semester, we had a 360 review, which is similar to any type of review process that organizations have. And I reviewed him and he reviewed me. And whenever it was his turn to review me, he mentioned that he very, very much appreciated and was slightly surprised that I didn't panic and I wasn't supremely upset and I didn't scold him whenever he said that he did something wrong, because it was his job to make sure that we had a table at that event that was very important to our recruitment. And I think that's just a perfect example of being able to keep your cool, being able to be calm as a leader, and the effect that it has on everybody else, because that was just one instance with one person. Imagine if you have that type of mentality throughout your every meeting that you have, throughout every interaction that you have with people around you, then not only are you making everybody else more calm, but Pradeep said that that also made him feel okay with coming to me with bad news. And so if you're always the person that is snapping if something's bad at somebody, then you're not getting the full story from all the members of your organization. And even if you get some of the story, it might not be a whole truth. It might be a half truth because they're afraid to tell you everything.
Right. That's true. It damages the lines of communication.
Absolutely.
So speaking of reviews and communication, one of the things you talk about is a part of your job as a leader may be to give critical, constructive feedback. And that's something that I think we struggle with sometimes, because as leaders, nobody likes to be the person that says, "You're not doing a good job." And so how do you suggest, or how do you teach other leaders to approach those complex situations, rather than just saying, "Everything's good, it's okay, we'll figure it out," and really address the issues that are happening?
Yeah. So I think that's a great segue. You must have been doing these interviews for a while now. That's a great segue. The last thing I talked about, but I will say that again, it all comes back to integrity. So we need to remember to always do the right thing, and giving constructive criticism and feedback that is useful is the right thing to do. And so if we're not giving useful feedback, then you might as well not even be giving feedback. And the reason why it always comes back to integrity, other than that, is because it is really easy to take the easy route when nobody's looking. And the easy route when nobody's looking, when it's just you and that other person, and you need to give that feedback, and you're in a room by yourself, it's really easy to think, well, I don't want to see what they have to say about me telling them that they didn't do a good job. So instead of going down that route, I'm just going to say that, like you said, everything's fine. You did pretty good this semester. That helps nobody. That doesn't help that person. It doesn't help you develop as a leader. And so the framework that I give, that I was taught at a very young age, was during reviews. If you don't have, and I think students will understand that whenever they get to large organizations or organizations that do HR right, then you're going to have a very well scripted out way of giving feedback and doing evaluations. But if you're in the situation where you don't, and if you're in high school or college, then you probably don't, focus on three things. Focus on talking about what you want that person to continue to do, what you want that person to stop doing, and what you want that person to start doing. So continue, stop, and start. If you use those three things, then it's really easy to put a framework around what we're going to talk about. And that is such a simple framework that you could use that as a disclaimer. So you sit down with the other person that you're going to evaluate and you say, all right, so during our evaluation, we're going to talk about three things. And we're going to talk about things that I want you to continue to do, things I want you to stop doing, and things I want you to start doing. And then do what I love to do. I love addressing the elephants in the room. I hate whenever there's just something looming over a conversation or a group of people. So the elephant in the room in these evaluations is the second one. So it's not continue to start or continue to do, because that means you're doing all right. I want you to continue these things. Start doing is normally something that's just new. Hey, I want you to start doing this in this situation. And that person will say, okay, it's the middle one. What do I want you to stop doing? So you can address that in the beginning and take the power away from it by saying, all right, so I gave you the three things that we're going to talk about, and the middle one, what I want you to stop doing. I know that's a bit difficult to talk about, and most of the time people don't like hearing it, but I think that we're both going to be better individuals, and we're going to have a better organization and a better team atmosphere if we address these things head on. And I'm not just addressing them with you, I'm addressing them with everybody. So whenever we get to that, just know that this is not something that I enjoy, but it's something that I think is important for us to talk about. And that small disclaimer right there, that helps take all the air out of the room as far as bad air, because now they're not holding their breath and thinking, oh God, I don't want to talk about this. This is going to suck. Like, we've already addressed it. It's a reality. It's going to happen. And then we're going to get past it.
Yeah, I like that. So you talk about what you want them to continue, what you want them to stop, and what you want them to start.
Yep.
I think using that framework also sets the expectation of, this is what's going to happen. This always happens during the reviews. This is what we're going to go over. And it also eliminates room for, or minimizes, I would say, room for like people feeling attacked or like even discriminated against, because this was the formula you use with everybody. So I think it's a great tool for leaders to use as a resource when they are conducting these types of reviews. That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So you're a new dad. You're in a new leadership role in your life, and it's very exciting. You have a long journey. You're at the beginning of a long journey. But what are some things that you're hoping, leadership-wise, to pass on, and not just to your baby, but to also to the people you're mentoring? What are some things that you're really kind of wanting to make sure when people say, oh yeah, no, that's Chris right there. I mean, I can tell this person was raised by Chris or trained by Chris, because this is what they're doing. So like, what's your mark?
Sure. I think we kind of hit on that already once, and it has to do with being calm. Being calm and having high levels of integrity, because if you are that way, then just think about any of the good leaders that you've had in your life, even the energetic ones. They generally don't have, they don't seem like they're not calculated. They seem like there's a very true rhyme and reason for everything that they do. And so whenever I think about things that I want to impart to my child or to anybody that I'm speaking to in a mentorship capacity, it really is being able to sit back and absorb the information that is coming to you in every situation, wherever you are, and then react to it in a calculated and I wouldn't want to say emotionless way, because emotion is important in the workplace or just in leadership, because if something bad happens and my team is looking at me and I don't display any type of frustration because it didn't go the way that I wanted to go, then they might think it's okay to fail, when that's not the case at all. But reacting in a way that pushes the team forward to where they need to be and doesn't take any steps backwards. I think that's kind of what I'm looking at. So a lot of that is being calm and having high levels of integrity, always doing the right thing. But it also is being able to just sit back and try to make a decision that is impactful to the organization and making sure that it's thoughtful. So maybe thoughtful decision making.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you talked about being calm and being cool and collected. There are some people out there that are perfectly okay with being an individual contributor. They're not looking to lead anybody. They don't want to be in charge.
Yep.
Why would you say even those people need the tools that you have in your book? Can you share a little about that?
Absolutely. And so I think we also talked about it a little bit with the leadership principle in my book, that it talks about you, in order to be a good leader, you need to be a good follower. And so I think leadership traits and principles are important to absolutely everybody. And it's so on top of being a management major, as far as my bachelor degree goes, I'm also a philosophy minor. So the philosopher inside of me wants to dissect this and talk about the philosophies behind it and the logic that goes with this, but I'll keep it extremely short because I could be long-winded once I go that route. But we can all agree that foundational leadership principles and traits are good things.
Yeah.
The same way that exercising is a good thing. The same way that many things are good things. So when I hear that type of question from people, because I've had that question to me from college students saying that I'm not a natural leader. I don't want to be there. I'm not pulled to it. There's no gravity for me to be pulled into it. So what does that mean for me? And the way that I come at that is a good thing is a good thing for everybody. It's not just a good thing for some people. So if you have those leadership traits and you exude them, even though you're not in the leadership position, then you're going to be better in your entire life, but you're also going to succeed better than your peers. So we talked about individual contributors. Individual contributors have lines of promotion in every organization. It's not just leaders. And so even at the CEO level, if you go to organizations, the Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies, you'll see that some of them have special advisors. Some of them have advisors for economics, for finance, for all these things. And those people don't have people underneath them because they're individual contributors at an extremely high level. So I say that because you're absolutely right. You don't need to be a leader or be in leadership roles to be happy, to have fulfillment in your career. You don't. But I will guarantee you that all those people at high levels that are high-level individual contributors exude leadership traits and principles that are foundational, that everybody understands, and they only got there because of that reason. And then I would also say this: if you're okay with being number 2 or number 3 in an organization, as far as if you're looking at it that way in the pecking order of a leader's number 1 and then the next is number 2 and 3 and 4, then you need to be prepared to fill in every now and again when that leader is not there, or if that leader is not does not have the expertise that you have in certain areas. A perfect example would be speaking to one of my wife's friends that she's friends with in her company. She works for a consulting company. And I was talking to him about a certain situation, and he brought up this very vague situation of him as an individual contributor being in a meeting. And he was in that meeting because when it came to his time to talk about his expertise, then he needed to talk about it, help make decisions, and talk to the clients. Well, he talked about being able to use leadership traits and principles when he's talking in meetings.
Mhm.
So when you're an individual contributor, you're contributing to something. And when you're contributing to something, that means at some point in time, it's your time to be the subject matter expert. And when it's your time, you need to be, you need to understand how to communicate. You need to, all the leadership traits that we talked about earlier, those are foundational traits for professionals and for leaders. So yeah, that's also another way of just saying that it's good for you as a leader, and it's good for you as a follower as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like how you compared it to exercising. You said a good thing is a good thing for everybody. I agree 100%. And the individual contributor example that you gave, like you may not be a leader in the sense of leading other people, but you do become, as you grow and develop in your career, a subject matter expert. And they get called on quite a bit
Yep.
in every industry. They're highly valued and sought after. So I love that. I think it also reinforces that leadership doesn't necessarily have to mean you're in charge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that doesn't, leadership is not does not determine somebody's value. So
Absolutely.
I think that's incredible. Okay, so Chris, where can we find you? How can we stay in contact with you and find out where you're speaking and what you're doing and what you're writing?
Sure, absolutely. So the main spot is going to be on LinkedIn. So just find Chris Molina on LinkedIn. Find my book on Amazon, because if you find it there, you're going to find the other books that I plan on writing, and all the other material or content that I plan on pushing out. And if you want to contact me directly via email, then you can contact me at chris-molina.com, and Molina is Molina. And yeah, that's exactly where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time out today to talk to us. I think that this is valuable information, especially for those in our audience that have teenagers and college students who are either going into their first leadership roles or are preparing for their leadership roles, or who are just building up their personal development and repertoire as individual contributors. I appreciate and value everything that you've given us here today. So thank you, Chris.
No, thank you. And also, I'd like to say that I very much appreciate what you're doing. I hope that it continues to move forward, because obviously I think it's wildly important. I focus on the high school and college age students, but I think at all levels, leadership is important, and what you're doing is very important. So thank you too.
Awesome. No problem. All right, Chris, we'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.